Hey everyone, welcome back to the Layback Podcast. I'm certainly excited to be back in interviewing someone else. Hopefully the audio is okay. I am outside again trying to avoid a crying baby, or fingers crossed, not a crying baby. I can only assume it's going to get bad in there at some point. But Mike, being a parent, knows this all too well and was willing and accepting of me to just do this impromptu talk with him today. So yeah, that'll bring us to our guest, Mike Grady. Grady's Pitching School up in Ohio. I've been following Mike on Twitter. Gosh, I don't know, maybe since 2019 or something like that. And we finally got connected and actually started talking a bit earlier this year. He's spoken with Daryl a good bit in the past, but Mike and I finally got connected, and it was about time to actually have him on. One of the things we're going to get into today with Mike is discovery, learning, process iteration, and really how he's built and changed his mission in coaching over the past 15, 20 years, because he really has been at this for a while, not just as a pro player himself, but coaching in college, coaching in the private sector, and really doing amazing things up in Northeast Ohio. So with that, Mike, hopefully I didn't steal too much of your thunder. I know I mentioned you pitch professionally in there. So please hit us with the other highlights that I might have missed.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be here. Yeah, I've been doing coaching. I've been in the coaching world since 2005, and it's weird to put in your bio 20 years, but it's sure gone fast. So, yeah, 2005, I actually was a player. I played for the Washington Wild Things in the Frontier League. At the same time, I was the pitching coach at Malone. So I was 23 years old. When I first got hired at Malone, I was actually younger than some of the seniors on the team that year. So they didn't know that. I didn't tell them that, but that was my first opportunity in coaching. And I just wanted it from day one, try to acquire as much knowledge as I could. So I spent 5 years at Malone. And after I got done playing, and then I ended up getting into public education because I realized from coaching that I really do like teaching. I spent 13 years as a teacher. I taught business and entrepreneurship, accounting, all at the high school level. And in 2022, I left, and now I coach full time, and I run our facility, which opened in 2016, Velocity Sports. So really, for the last 20 years, I've worked with pitchers either through coaching college baseball, or individually just working one-on-one. And as you alluded to, boy, it's changed from, maybe even just go back 5 years ago, but definitely I would say starting 10 years ago is when the revolution happened. And it was kind of cool to be a part of reading and learning and going through that whole process as a coach of changing what we do.
That's all too true when you look at your offerings with Grady's Pitching School. Know you guys have been very passionate about adding the most advanced technology you can, not just to say you have advanced technology, but truly to get measurements that will aid in player development, or to create a more objective path for these guys to follow. That leads directly into player plans, which I know you're passionate about. So maybe we'll dive in there. We'll come back to the outskirts of this later. We'll go back to the surface level, but why not just dive in, since we're already talking about how things have changed. So we'll start in the present. You're
Mhm.
super passionate about player plans. Maybe just walk that back ever so slightly for how player plans have changed for you over the years, and give us a look into what you're doing now to create those plans.
You're right. I think back when I started, a player development plan was a 5 minute conversation on here's what you're doing well, here's what we need to work on. And it was simple as that. And I think that worked great at the time. And then all of a sudden, you skip ahead a little bit, and our player plans were, hey, let's put video up on a TV screen and let's go over that together. And so we did that for a while. And then as more information is coming in, and you specifically look at Rapsodo, and just if you ask most players, do they really understand the data on that screen? And the answer is no. Like, they've seen their data, but they've never had anybody explain that to them. And all the information that comes with that. We also, 2 years ago, my brother-in-law is a doctor of physical therapy. So our conversation where this really started was a few years ago. when we're going to be training players all winter is we really need to know a little bit more about how they move, their mobility, their strength, make sure they're healthy for a full training program. And so I worked with him to build, and really he built the report with my input, both of our inputs. And that was kind of like a new open door to more information. Because what I learned was on the PT side or the strength side or the mobility side, if you're not able to move in a certain way, there's no drill pitching that is going to solve that. That kind of comes all the way to now. And now, not only I'll get in front of you. So a player comes in our door, we're going to do a functional movement screen. We're going to do a mobility assessment, a strength assessment, and that all gets put into a report from our PT. We're going to do a pitch design report where we print the PDF or we download the PDF from Rapsodo, soon to be TrackMan, but currently Rapsodo. And then now I'm using a biomechanics software called Uplift, and that gives us a PDF report. So I have all these reports coming in, but what really is changing is AI, because now what we do, amazingly enough, is we take all of our coaches' notes, we take all of the reports, and we upload it together into AI to help us connect all the dots. And I think before, if that process would have taken hours and hours to do all of that, now we can do that a lot quicker and really have a better plan put all together. And the most important part of that is athletes only have a limited amount of time to train. Their time is their biggest limiting factor. So we need to go after the things that impact them the most. And for every athlete, it's different. Most of them walk in the door and they want to throw harder, really all of them. But then the question becomes how? Oh, how are we going to do that? And sometimes it's we need to get in the weight room. We need to fix a movement issue. We need to improve our mobility. Sometimes it's all of those, but that's where we just need to all be on the same page before training starts. So that was a long answer to how we got to where we are today.
It is all good. I unfortunately don't have my notebook next to me, so I'm gonna put this out there now, because if I speak it out, hopefully I'll remember it. I have 2 questions, and they both go different ways.
Yeah.
So one is going to be regarding specifically those tests that are a part of the assessment, the variables that you're looking at or the measurements you're looking at. Another, which is pertinent to that answer, you said you utilize AI when you're creating these plans. When you look at Twitter now or when you're online, maybe a year ago, it was in vogue to say that you're using AI. Now, over the past month, you're seeing some people that are demonizing the use of AI in the creation of training plans. I have a decent understanding of what you guys are doing and how you're utilizing AI, but I'd love if you could go into it a little bit more and explain how AI is assisting you in what you're doing, not doing the work for you.
Right. Yeah. So here's a simple example. So when we sit down with a player, we take a page or two of notes. So those questions that we ask, we go through what are your goals? We write down everything that we see in terms of how they move. And now we get a PDF back from our software, which is called Uplift. It's a 2 iPad setup, and it actually measures how fast it measures all kinds of things, but it measures how fast their pelvis is rotating, how fast their trunk is rotating, and how fast their arm moves. And it actually then puts that in an order and tells you the sequence of that. And some players are in sequence and some aren't. So what I like to do is I like to pull that data into our coaches' notes. And I'll use AI to do that by giving a prompt, say, look at coaches' notes, look at the data from this report, and integrate that into a plan, or organize these notes in a way, but bring the data into this and make it relevant. And so it's just helpful because it's really just taking what we've already seen for the most part, but attaching a number to it. And I think that's good for the player. You could tell the player that, hey, your pelvis rotation velocity is below average, right? But if you tell them, hey, it's 350 degrees, per second or whatever the number is, and the average is 500, and here's where you're at, it gives them more concrete number to look at. And then moving forward, now that we're using this, is we're going to be able to come back and retest and do the plan. So what we're doing is if it's a rotational issue, we're using a lot of med ball work, PVC swings, water bags, that kind of stuff. Obviously integrating the strength training program into that. And now we have numbers to go back and retest that. But AI is just helping us better communicate the notes and the messages to the player in a way that makes sense for them. And sometimes some of the stuff we write is we're using terminology the player may not understand. So we actually try to make it, hey, make this understandable for a high school freshman. Make it understandable for them so they know what this means. They don't know all those biomechanic terms sometimes.
So not only is it helping with organization, it's on your end, it's also helping the phrasing become more digestible for the athlete. Then maybe one more piece on the AI here, at least for the moment. Who knows where this answer is going to take us? But are you using AI right now to make drill or exercise suggestions?
Yes. And
Okay.
so that is interesting because I have noticed, and I just started playing with it just to see what it would come up with. And in fact, we tested this about 6 months ago. So back in the off season, we had a player, and one of our strength coaches, Matt Knoll, performance coach, is also a doctor of physical therapy. So he does a lot of these assessments. We have two, my brother-in-law, Scott Bailey, who started this and does a great job, and now Matt does them too. So we had a player, he approached me with some shoulder soreness, complaining of some shoulder soreness. So I talked him through, and basically I just wrote down what he was experiencing because I wanted to give it to Matt. So before I gave it to Matt, I actually took all those notes and put it in AI and say, be a PT and, give me an assessment of this. And I actually printed it out. I'm not a medical person, so I would never use AI for that. Like I was never going to take that report and then implement that. What I wanted to do is I wanted to have Matt look at it and say, hey, this is what I did. This is what got created. Like, what do you think of this? And he said this is actually a very good assessment of what was happening. So Matt was the one that ended up working with that player individually. But that was the first time I'm like, wow, like this is kind of interesting to be able to see something like that. But on the drill side, when we started playing with that, about 80% of the drills I thought were appropriate, and a lot of them were ones that we did. And then some of the drills were, I don't want to say what they were, but it was like, never suggest that again. That that is banned. We do not do that. So that was kind of funny too.
So you aren't following AI suggestions as if they're gospel right now. It's just a additional assistance in the decision-making process.
What I was talking to a player about this, and I was telling him how we would do this, and I told him, I said, when we have 15 pages of PDF reports to go through to create your plan, AI is helpful because it can pull that information into one page. And I said, getting a suggestion and an idea is good, right? The more ideas you have, the better. And then you make that decision. Know that some coaches may be hesitant to do that. But at the end of the day, you're the one that is signing off on that plan. And you're just trying to get as much information in front of you as possible before saying, yes, let's do this. And no, let's not do that. So yeah, it's our plan. It's just helping us organize it in a way that is quicker and faster and makes sense for the athlete.
In discussing the reality of the situation, you are having to program for 100 plus pitchers on a weekly basis. I don't know how many guys you are seeing daily,
Yeah.
but I know you at any given point are in the triple digits for
Yeah.
athletes that you're working with. If you have to go through the creative process of determining the right programming for every single one of those guys, there isn't enough time in the day to do it effectively and to give every athlete the same amount of effort that they deserve. So
Correct.
if you can lean on something to provide support for you, it makes sense to me.
Well, correct. I mean, well, the reality is we weren't doing this a year ago the way we're doing it now. Much better now. We were collecting a lot of the reports, but I didn't feel like we were using it as well as we could because we were kind of looking at the highlights. And if there was anything flagged, we obviously would look at that. But now we're actually able to use the information that we have much more effectively because we can summarize the information faster. So I'll just argue that without it, we weren't doing as good of a job with the info that we have. And we've been able to take massive steps forward. And that's one of the reasons I invested in the biomechanics software because I knew that we could use it. If I got a PDF report, I knew that we could integrate that really fast. And I send those reports directly to the player, but then I send them the summary. And I tell them, like, this is an AI summary that we're trying to pinpoint exactly where we should start with the training process. So no, we just weren't doing it the way we are now. So it's been massively helpful.
Do you have your AI software digesting any FlexPro grip data at this point?
Yes.
I was about
Yes.
to say I really need to know, what ChatGPT or whatever AI you're using thinks of FlexPro grip so far.
Well, I uploaded some of the charts and, I have my own tab with that. So when the numbers come in, I just plug them in. I already knows where it needs to be in terms of the force production versus velo. So that chart, it's already uploaded. So that's been massively helpful. And then it explains what we're talking about. Obviously, the kid puts on a Flex Pro grip for the first time. I always will say, have you seen that movie Enter It's in Your Hands? And a lot of them say yes, which is strange. That's so old.
They're not old
I'm
enough
like,
for that.
I'm like, this is what that reminds me of. But so it kind of helps them understand, and that's we've been teaching a lot of that. And obviously, the grip strength concepts around grip strength and the UCL and grip strength and spin rate. Really, a couple of years ago, that started, and that's a big part of our conversation with the training plan now. Hey, your curveball spin rate is low. Why is that? Well, it could be several reasons. It could be grip, it could be pressure, it could be their strength, a lot of things. But now we're better at saying, okay, this is what we need to do to address that.
I'm so happy that you brought up the training plan again because you have somehow brought me back to that initial point where I didn't know which way to go with those 2 questions. So now my question about the training plans, or I guess rather even the assessment in the data that you are looking at. How do you juggle, I guess, the difficulties associated with performing assessments and creating training plans for athletes just to do better on assessments versus creating training plans for athletes to perform better on the mound or on the field? Because
Right.
oftentimes those are related, but they aren't necessarily 100% correlated.
Right. I think we communicate with athletes that number one, when you go through the functional movement screen and the process our PT has, our number one goal is to make sure that you are physically prepared for training and that any risk factors that we have identified and we've given corrective exercises to address that. So whether it's range of motion with your throwing arm or non-throwing arm, hip range of motion, flexion, just whatever it is, there's a lot of research based on, and we communicate with them. So our PTs do a great job saying, this is what we found, and this is what the research says. And some of the research is stunning in terms of loss of flexion or loss of range of motion, how much more at risk for injury that athlete is. So if we can get ahead of that, number one, that's really, really important. And that's really what we are trying to do with the physical side of that screen. And then on the mound, that's more performance related. But a lot of times we even tell the kids, like, we're not assessing velocity when we do our assessment. We're looking at how you move because your velocity is a result of how you move with that. But even, this just happened about a month ago. One of our athletes was going through the assessment with our PT, Matt, and he tested positive on a labor test. And he had been complaining of shoulder pain. And so, Matt walks down to the athlete and let me know what happened. And I told him, I said, we're not going to throw today. We need to get that checked out. The doctor had confirmed that he had a labrum injury. And luckily, it was found in July and not in November when training starts. So that's a huge reason why we do that, because the athlete had really not indicated that his shoulder was bothering that much. He was coming down to warm up to throw. And our PT's like, well, let's talk about this. So we're shut him down. And that's why we do these assessments, that reason alone.
And given the importance of the assessments, are you finding athletes that are really just chasing down success in the assessment? I guess I'm just kind of rephrasing the question because I do think that's super important. I just want to get your take on the ambiguity surrounding being good at a test
Right.
versus how it actually transfers to the field, because it
Yeah.
doesn't have to.
Right. And I think all of our new athletes, they've never gone through the assessment process before. So they have no idea what to expect. So there's really no way to try to be good at that assessment. They just are following the directions and doing it. Now, our returning athletes may have gone through because they go through it once a year. So they're a little bit familiar, but we do change and update them annually. So we're doing different things this year than last year. So I think in general, they're just following instructions and trying to do the best they can. They're trying to do well and whatever they're being told to do, but we've never really had that concern about,
Okay.
they're just trying to perform
I
for this assessment.
just get a really good shoulder IR number for the sake of having a really good shoulder IR number.
Yeah. They're just not aware of
Okay.
what that means for the most part. They're just following the instructions and push hard here and let me, get you into this range of motion here and balance here. And from the rotary stability test from the FMS, I know that they're not practicing that ahead of time because they do not do well. That's the hardest. That's the lowest scoring one on the functional movement screen for our athletes by far.
Maybe I was asking those questions and so passionate about them because I know I was that guy. If I was being assessed on something, it didn't matter what it was. I was trying as hard as I could to be as good at that specific thing
Yep.
as possible. So the sit and reach in gym class back in school, I
Yep.
was trying to dominate the sit
Yep.
and reach. I was trying to dominate the pacer test. All those things that in gym class they were
Yes.
cool, and it brought me street cred on the playground in 5th grade,
Yep.
but mean absolutely nothing for anything outside of being cool for my classmates. That stuck with me as I went through a baseball career as well.
And that makes sense. And maybe our guys will do that eventually when they become super familiar and knowledgeable with these assessments when they get into college. So I bet in college they'll try to cheat, but now it's too new.
Which is so weird. It's almost like high school athletes have this beautiful, blissful state that they operate in because they are so unaware of what matters for the most part. Now, that is both good and bad that social media has kind of removed that veil because, for the most part, it seems like high school kids now know what they need to do to play college baseball at the level that they want to, or get drafted, or all these different things. They know how hard they need to throw, which can muddy the waters for what's important in the now.
Yep.
But thankfully, generally, it means athletes are going to be more open to going through the process versus the college guy who's gone through it, who has the time under his belt, is trying to win at every single thing right now because they know their clock is ticking.
Correct. And I think I see that our athletes, they're on social media, so they see the videos and the content, and they may be aware of things. But a lot of times when we're going through, especially how they move, or we're talking about pitch grips or drills, and I ask them, where'd you get that? Well, I saw it online. And they just saw a quick video, but they never really had someone like a coach in front of them explaining more in detail what they're doing or what this means. So I think our athletes really value that because they're taking a deeper dive into everything than what they see online.
Now, let's talk a little bit more about your athletes and I guess the VIP program because I've seen that on your social media for years. One, I like the branding. I definitely want to be a very important person or very
Yes.
important pitcher, I guess. So, how do you set up your programming and how might it differ from other training systems that you've seen?
Yeah. So VIP, the Velocity Improvement Program, it could stand for anything that you want, though, was first developed back in 2014. And I did a pilot group of 8 pitchers then when the model at the time was just kids did lessons, one-on-one lessons. And when the idea of velocity is trainable, which I would say 10 plus years ago became mainstream versus you're born with velocity or not became a thing. That's when we started to integrate the strength training and the ballistic training on the throwing end into one program. So the program started by looking at drive lines hacking the kinetic chain. That was the first kind of resource that we used to train athletes. In that pilot group, we mainly did pull downs and we used weighted baseballs, 4 and 6 ounces mainly. And from that, there was a significant jump in velocity. And so I saw that myself. And obviously now we know a lot more on why. But at the time, that was the start of like this type of training works, and let's build this. And so I think the first year we had 8, and I had no facility yet. I was just renting a facility. And then the next year we had 24. And then the next year was 2016. That was when we had our first location. I think we had maybe 50 athletes in that. And so at that point, I started bringing on staff and performance coaches and having other people help do this, because what I realized was, even at that time, your 30-minute throwing session once a week is not going to cut it. You need to have a plan for your lifting. You need to be able to throw X percentage of days through the off season. And we changed that program significantly, because I think it was 2017 when we got our first Rapsodo. So then we started building pitch design into that. So we joke even today, because John Piscateri, who's one of our pitching coaches, was with me from day one. He and I have seen the evolution in the training program to doing primarily pull downs, to a shift of mainly, we do still do ballistic training, but we work a lot from the mound now. So the program is in very specific phases. Right now we're in the assessment phase, so that's super important. Then when we start, we'll do a build up phase with the throwing, because we start in November, so we don't expect athletes to be 100% ready at that point. We'll do a 5-week build up phase, but really we use that time to integrate all the drill work, integrate the lifting plans, teach them the arm care. So there's a lot of learning that happens over the first 5 weeks. And that second 5 weeks is the high intent phase. That's a mix of pull downs and velo days and medium days and then mound days. And then last part of the program, which is my favorite, is we bring catchers and hitters in and we run lanes of lives. So we have a Rapsodo in every lane, and we have hitters and catchers and a coach with every pitcher, and they get to kind of use all of their stuff, and we coach them through all of their off-speed stuff. And so it's really, at that point, it's about execution, taking what you've hopefully the velo gains that you've gotten and the strength gains and integrate it on the mound. So 3 phases now, and it just leads right into high school tryouts, which honestly, the biggest benefit is for our basketball kids, because those kids, if they're not doing this, they're in basketball. And a lot of times basketball runs past the start of high school tryouts, and those pitchers just aren't ready. But our VIP athletes are ready, and they're, from day one, when they get to their high school team, they've been doing what they need to do to be successful. And Jake Bean is an example of that. He, in high school, broke the high school basketball career points record, and would come in on Sundays and sometimes Wednesdays, depending on his schedule, and get his pitching training done. So Jake went to Kent, and now he's at Louisville this year for the first year. And so that's a great example of someone just following the process, playing another sport, and doing it at a really, really high level.
I'm sure that's a bit more common for you than maybe some of the other coaches that I talk to on here, given your locale, being in Northeast Ohio. There is, knowing my Northwest Ohio background, there's still this huge emphasis on playing every sport you can. I didn't exemplify that myself as a high school athlete. I did play a little bit of golf. I played some soccer. I played some basketball, but without question, I skipped everything if I had a voluntary baseball workout.
Yep.
Everything, all my energy went towards baseball. I'm not saying that doesn't happen now, but you still have soccer players, basketball players, football players that are coming in and training with you. So how do you educate those athletes knowing the importance of workload and building
Right.
up and all these things? Sorry if I stole your thunder on that answer, but
No.
how do you express that to the athletes to ensure that they are still coming in without a parent thinking he just wants our money so he can throw with us when it's not even baseball season?
Yeah, so it's interesting, because I just played baseball. And the reason why I wasn't the best athlete, and so if I was going to do good, I needed to work hard on baseball all the time. And that was just my personal background. So multi-sport kids are much better athletes than I ever was, and it's awesome they can do that. So we always support our pure baseball players that want to focus on that, because they know they need to get to the highest level, or our multi-sport kids, whatever works for each individual. Back to that question, workload is the key. In fact, a couple of years ago, we had a basketball kid, and he was on a velo day, and his velocity was down 5 miles an hour. We track everything. We pull him aside, and I'm like, Dylan, what's up? Is your arm okay? He goes, I just had a basketball game last night, and I'm gassed. I'm like, okay, so let's stop, and we're gonna treat this more as a low intent or a recovery day. And so I think education is number one. And what we talk to parents about is a lot of parents will want their multi-sport athletes to do everything in the manual. And that's a lot easier to do if you're not playing another sport. So we talk to them about it, is say, hey, do your best. If you played a game and you're gassed, then you need to recover. And so we teach them a lot about recovery. We adjust the workout in the weight room with our basketball kids, all of our winter sport athletes. And so it's just about like communicating with them and helping them understand workload and what workload is. Workload isn't just throwing. Workload is your body's battery. And if you need to recharge, then we need to make that a priority. So that conversation about workload and about managing that and understanding if we're not feeling up to it that day happens more than anybody can imagine on the back end, just to make sure that we're putting our athletes in good positions, not working them too hard. We're here to train, not to make you tired. So that's a different approach.
I'm sure this also ties back into what you're doing with assessments, because how do you actually know how quote unquote tired or fatigued someone is? An athlete, especially a high school kid, is gonna be like, no, I'm fine. What information
Right.
I'm getting from no, I'm fine. But if you know what their expected ranges of motion are, their expected force production, their expected whatever else, velocity. I know that's kind of an easy one to go off of,
Yeah.
but all these other pieces, because as you said, workload is more than just what you're doing throwing wise, it's what your body is experiencing. So if you can go back and look at these objective measurements at any point on the body, you can tell when a guy is peaking or a guy is in the gutter.
Yeah. So we do two things and they're both different. But the number one is our coaches, myself included, we have a conversation with each player before they start and ask them how they feel. If they're a winter sport kid, we ask them, when they played their last game, what their lifting routine is, just all of that. Those conversations help us. And sometimes we change the training plan that day based on what the player says. But I think the most important thing that we started doing, this was a few years ago, is there's a QR code in the weight room. And as soon as they're done throwing, they come in and they have to fill out that QR code, which is basically they have to answer questions on their performance that day. And so sometimes it's their velo numbers, sometimes it's their maxes that day if they're in the weight room. But every day it's rate your arm health 1 through 10. And so we educate them on that. And we've learned that they will tell us via the form much more than they'll tell us. Players are not just going to come out and say my arm hurts. If you ask them, they might. But on that form, when we get that back, it pops right in. That helps us go right at maybe an issue with fatigue. And that's usually what it is. It's so helpful for us to manage the throwing workload just from knowing on a 1 through 10 scale how you felt that day. It's very important.
What software are you using for the QR code? Is it just a QR code creator online?
It's a QR code. It links to a Google form. And then that Google form populates into a Google Sheet. And we literally have the Google Sheet up and we see them come in live. So usually we catch them before they even leave that day. And usually it's, hey, because of this, this is what I want you to do tomorrow for the
Yeah.
next day, or let's follow up here. And so it's just something that we monitor very closely.
I asked because that's something that is easily applicable by anyone. Anyone can do that, and it's increasing communication. Now, from your experience both as a coach and as an educator, although those two are pretty much synonymous in my book, why do you think athletes are more comfortable sharing that information on the Google form as opposed to in person? You obviously have a relationship with these athletes. You'd think they'd be able to come to you and say what they're feeling, but there's some sort of disconnect there.
Right. And it's almost like, when you're answering questions online, like, have you ever lied about your birthday? If somebody asks you your birthday on a forum, like, no, right? And I feel like it's the same thing. Like, you're just not going to lie. Like, there's no benefit of it, and I don't, it just there's so much more honest. It's and not that it hasn't happened, because we've had that happen where someone put your arm health was 10, but then we knew that it wasn't, and we said, hey, yeah, I just didn't want to tell you. That does happen still, but it happens much less than not that they lie to us, they just won't disclose it, right? They just won't say anything. And it's also too, we communicate with parents, and parents know that we're asking these questions. They know why. So I think at home, they're hearing that from mom and dad saying, hey, make sure you're letting them know. And, if someone rates their arm health a 2 out of 10, parents get an email too. We'll work through that. So it works so well. It really does. Just a simple 1 through 10.
Then how do you connect that subjective feedback to what you guys are tracking objectively? I know you've only had FlexPro Grip for a short period of time, or other readiness testing, whether it's jump testing or different things like that. Are you seeing the objective outpace the subjective, or is it the subjective leads the objective? If you follow what I'm saying, like,
Do. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So then I won't talk anymore. I'll just let you
No,
go.
before, like now it's all objective because we have all of the data. But once the training starts, it becomes much more subjective on how they feel as how that's, what's leading what. And so the subjective is what we get first generally. And then Matt Knoll, who's also a performance coach as a PT, if there's an issue that needs to go to him, I'll just send the athlete to him and he'll assess them. And so then we can go back and say, hey, internal range of motion, there's a deficit here that we didn't see before. So
Mhm.
we'll look at that. If that makes sense, that's how that generally goes
No,
once training
totally.
starts. Yeah.
Totally. I guess I asked because I think it's unique that we're at a point with a lot of systems creations. I can call back to something that happened at Lindenwood University, a pitching coach we work with closely there, Denton McNamee, does force plate testing, does shoulder dynamometry, utilizes FlexPro grip, and oftentimes will see someone possibly entering a valley. And
Yeah.
before that athlete even speaks up, he's approaching them saying, how are we feeling? As
Right.
opposed to the how are we feeling beating that objective
Right.
on the list. Granted, you're juggling hundreds of athletes, but
Right.
I wanted to know, like, how often. I'm sure there's times where the objective is popping up before the athlete says anything, or vice versa. I was just wondering where we are on that kind of spectrum.
Yeah. And we do assessments every 4 weeks. And so what we'll meet with the coaching staff and decide what we want to go back and retest. This year will be the first year that Flex Pro Grip will be a part of that. Sometimes the objective does lead to the subjective when we do an assessment 4 weeks in and the numbers have dropped. Last year, we really did that for the first time, and that was very helpful. A lot of times it just was traced back to fatigue and not recovering. And
Mm.
so that intervention was important earlier than what would have been if we didn't do that.
Given that you're working with so many high school athletes, I hate to fully assume, but that's your greatest clientele, right? That kind of
Was
high
Yep.
school age group. Is that kind of the lowest hanging fruit, even lower than strength, is just getting guys to sleep enough and eat enough?
It is amazing how that sometimes is ignored in terms of you think about the strength and the throwing and all of that. But if they're up all night, assume they're studying for a test for whatever reason,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, that's what we'll
Uh,
say.
we'll assume, right? Because on Saturday morning at 9, that's what they're doing on Friday. That question is getting asked a lot more. How late were you out? And sometimes that is the issue that day. And you can tell when they walk in that they hadn't had enough sleep that night, or sometimes you can tell after school that it was a tough day that day. And so we have to factor that in as
Hmm.
well, because that is a part of the entire training process is recovery and sleep. And it's become something that we have talked more about just in a general sense in terms of performance. If you want to perform better, you need to recover better. And we're talking about that more now than ever.
So it's at least a buzzword at this point among those who train with you.
Correct. Correct.
Great. I find that interesting because I don't work face to face with many athletes anymore. And then even at that, most of the athletes that I'm working with are college and pro guys, or the elite of the elite high school guys who seem to have every tool in their toolbox at this point.
Right.
they have Whoop, they have Aura, they have all these things that are tracking every single bit of recovery in their grip testing. They're doing all these things, so they
Mm.
seem to know where their baselines are, but that isn't indicative of every single athlete who cares about baseball. So
Right.
I definitely wanted to ask you about that. Now let's step things back. I know way back when we said we were going to talk about discovery and process iteration. We have talked a good bit about that, even if we haven't used those terms directly at this point. You did mention hacking the kinetic chain from Driveline, kind of kicking things off for you back in 2014 with the velocity improvement program. What else has really influenced changes for you? Or are there individuals that you have leaned on or followed over the years that have kind of forced you to question the way you do things? Maybe not fully alter or change, but at least giving you pause for you to step back and audit your processes.
Yeah, there's several. Obviously, Driveline was the leader in that. So they're still huge in terms of training. But I think now, if you look at what Tread Athletics is doing and the content that they are sharing, what's nice is if there's a video out about a certain concept, I'll be on the floor with an athlete, and sometimes we can test those things out. So that's been really helpful. Obviously, Eric Cressy and his work is amazing. To me, I'm always trying to find out what is out there that can help our athletes. And so I feel like that's my job, is to always have an open mind in terms of understanding what's new and what people are doing, and just more ideas, the better. So every year I go to the ABCA conference, and that's been a great resource. I go to our state baseball coaches clinics. And so just having those conversations with people that I know or people that I don't know and asking questions. Last week, I had lunch with Corey Douglas, Mount Union's pitching coach, and we talked about process and some of the things where they're doing. It's the idea that we never stop learning, and there's always something out there that we can maybe better implement. And sometimes we dive into something and realize, hey, that current process is pretty good, and we're going to stick with that. Even another one that's even new is motor preference experts, and the idea of motor preferences. Matt Swope was actually my teammate. He's Maryland baseball's head coach. He was my teammate for the Wild thing. So I got to hear his presentation on that. I have his book. There's just so many resources out there now. And I just think keeping an open mind and kind of that sense of this is how we're going to do things in our building, not just from me, but from every coach and every player. And it's even great when the players come with an idea that they want to try a new drill or something that they saw. And the first thing we'll say, all right, let's try it. Let's see how you feel. Because everything works or
Hmm.
nothing works. It just depends on the athlete. Sometimes maybe it's not the best program or whatever. If the athlete believes in it, then it can be effective. So there's a lot that we could dive into on the content side, but there's more out there than ever. But I enjoy, Twitter is a great resource on diving into some of that content that's out there. That's everyone's sharing their stuff, which is great.
Something you brought up there that I want to spend a little bit of time on. You actually mentioned it twice. Whether an athlete brings something up to you or going over a drill with someone on the floor that you saw on social media or they saw on social media, I understand that that might be different. It might not be a part of their plan, but how often are you having more of a collaborative approach with your players as opposed to maybe 5 years ago and even 10 years ago, where I'm assuming certainly 10 years ago, you were likely being leaned upon as the expert, expected to know everything, versus now with the abundance of available information, I would like to think it's leaned more collaborative, but I don't wanna assume your situation. So how have you seen that change over the years?
You know, um, as a educator, I always have taken the collaborative route. Always, I always felt that was better. Even as a coach 20 years ago, one thing that I still do today is I will tell our player I'm coaching. I coach my son's team now, and I say it's 3 against 1. And we always used to. This is just a funny thing, but it made a difference. So when I was coaching at Malone, I would say it's 3 against 1, and we always said it when we left the bullpen, and we'd always walk sort of together. And I wanted them to know that it's me, the pitching coach, you, the pitcher, and your catcher. We are all working to get that hitter out. And when you give the pitcher that mentality, I think it makes a difference. It really does. It's very powerful. And I think now what we see is some of our athletes have a very clear understanding. They've worked with a lot of coaches in the past. They understand how they move. And so it's really collaborative then. And sometimes they're looking to me for guidance. And then over time, as they learn what drills they like, it becomes more collaborative. So it just all depends. We meet the athlete where they are. But our college athletes, they've been coached by a lot of people. And so usually I'm asking questions, what works for you? Because at that point, I think by the time they get to college, they do realize they are their own best coach. I think a freshman in high school may not realize that. They don't have the knowledge base yet. And sometimes they're just going off whatever their coach says. And I think over time, the athlete becomes a little bit more like, I know this works for me. And so even the other day, I was talking to an athlete about short work bullpens, that he really felt that 50-foot bullpens really helped his command. And I said, well, you need to talk to your high school coach about that and get that implemented into what you're doing at your school. A very easy thing. It's just like, hey, go have that conversation. Because I know sometimes kids don't like to do, could be a little bit scary, but I told him, I said, a 50-foot bullpen, that's not something wild and crazy. That's an easy thing. Even do it on your own. Bring the catcher 10 feet in front of the plate and get him down and do that short box.
Hopefully that kid isn't throwing 90 though, because that gets scary catchers real fast.
Exactly. 70-80% max.
I don't know if you remember where you heard it from or if it was self-created. Feel free to tell me it was self-created if you don't want to reveal your sources, but where did the 3-on-1 concept come from, if you recall? Because I really like that phrasing.
I don't remember exactly, but the idea of it came from my college pitching coach my last year, Dave Koblenz, Kobe. Kobe, he's in Ohio's High School Baseball Hall of Fame as a high school coach. He coached at Duke. He was with the Indians as a scout for a while. And he was just the best in terms of connecting with his players. One of the best stories with him was we would meet after wins and after losses after the game. And obviously, you know how those meetings go after losses. Didn't matter when Kobe's, he's driving down the street. He sees his Jeep driving away. He never was a part of that meeting. One day I asked him, Kobe, you don't stick around for that after game meeting? He goes, nope, 24 hours. I won't have a conversation with any of you, good or bad, until the next day. I think a very pro mentality, you know what I mean? And I said, well, why? He said, well, I could tell you 1,000 things that are positive, but the one thing that I say that I wish I wouldn't have because of the emotion of that game, I can't take back. Because I never want to put any of us in that situation. Not that he would, because he was just so measured in his words anyway. But that is one thing that I learned from him. And I really, even to this day, try to model myself after him because I know what kind of influence he had on me.
That's beautiful. I paused because I guess I didn't really know where to go from there. Like how can I respond to the impact of relationships other than say relationships are powerful? It's
Right.
what we all strive for in the coaching world or the development world is how can we have that touch on someone else to think that every single day something someone told you 24 years ago, what you graduated in '01?
Oh, 04 from
Oh,
college.
okay, so
Yep.
the college career was 2000 to 2004, right?
Correct.
So something that you heard 21-ish years ago directs what you do every
Yep.
single day. As I said, that's what we strive for. It's how can we make that impact? And I guess it's even crazier to think that we don't know what phrase it is or what thing we say or what action we make that is going to be the thing that sticks.
I've had athletes tell me, and one of the craziest examples is Tyler Hampu, who was a 2024 MLB draft pick for the Rockies. His junior year of high school, he was cut. He didn't make the team. He was still developing. He threw above average, but the command wasn't there yet. He showed up the week after, and I said, what do you want to do? He's like, I'm going to throw 90 next year and make the team. I'm like, okay, let's do that. He's just like, let's just get to work. No questions asked, And then the next year, he did make the team, but then COVID canceled his season. So he never played high school baseball, got a JUCO opportunity, did well, went to Austin P. And I'll never forget, I was watching him on ESPN Plus. You can watch all the games now from home. And, he's pitching against Mississippi State and got the save. And then later that year, he was drafted. And then I had a conversation about like just that path, because how often do you hear that, right? You go from, you don't play high school baseball, and 4 years later, you're drafted. And now he sends me videos throwing 99.3. And I said, I'm not impressed till you hit 100, jokingly. He told me, he said, it was the fact that I could come to your facility and everybody believed in me and I could do my thing. And just that belief. At the time, you're just doing the best you can for every kid you see. You don't think of that. And then when you hear that, it makes you pause, and you just know that every single athlete you're dealing with could be the next Tyler Hample. You don't know, but maybe not. But maybe that experience of baseball leads them to their next thing. And so it is super powerful. You're right.
There's no sense of me trying to add on to any of that. So the best thing I can do is pivot. And what I am going to pivot to is something I read on your Twitter a couple years ago, and it was all your political takes. No, I'm kidding. We're not going to get into that.
Yeah, I don't think that has ever made it on there.
No. So what I remember reading, and I hope I didn't just create this out of thin air, but if I'm not mistaken, you pitch one game per year. If I'm not mistaken, a year or two ago, you posted all your thoughts of how you were successful in this game, or how you've outpitched these college guys that are still competing. And I just want you to talk about that experience, and hopefully I'm right in that this was you, because I remember this. I know it's someone I follow, and I am 99.9% sure this is your story.
So I play summer ball still. I'm 43. I play in a 25 and over league. So I pitch every Sunday.
Okay, so it's not just one game a year.
Yeah,
you're still competing.
Exactly. And it's so much fun. It's so different though now, because when I played with a lot of adrenaline, just how my brain worked. And I don't feel that anymore. So I kind of wish I had that back. Maybe I need like 20,000 people there or something to do that. But the experience of that is awesome. It's so much fun to compete. It's so much fun to go through the same process that the kids I work with every day go through. And so that's why I love it. I still get out there, still pick people off as a lefty pitcher, still throw changeups down and away. I pitch the way I always have, which is change speeds, hit spots, give your team a chance to win.
If you were setting up your own training plan, so you didn't have to be the crafty lefty that hits spots and doesn't matter if you walk someone because you'll just pick them off anyways. If you were trying to be the best 43-year-old possible, not just a guy who goes out and has fun, how would you create your plan?
I would follow the VIP manual, which I do. Right? Like, it's funny, one of the things that I think about a lot is back when I was in high school, it was, even at the time, was like, yeah, you can lift, but it's not going to help you. You definitely don't bench press, all that stuff. I just feel like if I had, as a player, because I always worked hard, I always kind of was an underdog as an athlete, and I always wanted to outwork people, I would have followed to a T what we have available today. I would have loved it. And I know it would have made a difference having the resources we have today. And so I feel like if I could help be that coach for myself and another kid, that's really important.
So I'll check back in a couple months and expect you to be deadlifting 405,
right.
Squatting 335.
That's right. Try not to get hurt.
Ripping pull downs with your guys.
All of it. Let's go. I get on the floor and throw with them. So, I just got to be feeling good that day. So
where's the arsenal at right now?
So my joke is, if I can't throw 80, I retire. So I'm still pitching. So that's
okay. That's pretty good.
That's the deal. That's how I feel.
I have to imagine the 25 plus league throwing over 80s still probably has to be in the upper 25%.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Because there's a range. There's a range of ages of pitchers on all of that. But yeah, that makes me feel good. That's not slow like in the other world.
No, it's really not slow. But yeah, good for you.
I mean, I tore my Achilles tendon in 2019 pitching. I was fielding a bunt, complete rupture. my wife's like, "Well, that's it for you." I'm like, "Yeah, we'll see about that." I think I told her, "Yeah," and then next year I'm back out there, so it didn't stop.
The reason you married her was specifically for her PT brother, correct?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
his
right.
I figured that was connected somehow. Yeah, Mike, is there anything you feel like we missed in this conversation?
No, I appreciate not only kind of sharing the process of what we do today, but kind of how I got there and just a little bit even into the relationship side of coaching. I think we hit a nice range of topics today.
Awesome. Well, one more thing I need from you, and that is for you to drop how people can get in touch with you.
Sure. So through my website, which is Grady'sFishingSchool.com, and then Twitter and Instagram, I'm just at Pitching School. And so I'm pretty involved and active on both those platforms. If anybody has any questions or wants to talk pitching or coaches, some of the process that we're using, we did just pull the trigger on a TrackMan. So once that comes in next week, kind of the new project is getting it up and running. So I'm super excited about that.
Great, man. Well, I really appreciate the time today, Mike. I didn't get interrupted on my side. Might have gotten distracted a time or two by my dogs running around the yard, but I like to think I gave you the most undivided attention I could as a new father just trying to escape the madness for a few minutes during the day.
You did great. You didn't even look tired. So I'm super impressed.
I definitely had coffee this morning and I am macro dosing creatine. Not a nutritionist or anybody with those degrees. I cannot tell anyone that they should be taking creatine, I suppose. However, I'm a big fan. And if you take 25 grams of it per day, there are studies to show that that can counteract the effects of fatigue. And I like to
Interesting.
think I'm a walking example of that right now.
Interesting. Well, my red solo cup is my ice water with my creatine powder. So nothing else.
Perfect.
That's what was in here today.
Yes, the Layback Podcast brought to you by creatine. If any brand wants to sponsor us, please reach out. I'm not a fan of gummies. I'm a powder guy myself. So there we go. Anybody, please, we'll take it. And then maybe give a little kickback to Mike in the process. But Mike, thanks a ton. This was great. And to all the listeners out there, thanks for laying back with us.